fuga fuga. Wanna money, money, Africa money, oga de chop am fuga fuga. Ide chop am nyanga nyanga, oga de chop am nyafu nyafu, nyafu nyafu. Wa wa wa, oga de chop am ya. Ide chop am fuga fuga, oga de chop am nyanga nyanga, nyanga nyanga. Boom boom boom, oga de chop am wa.
Joy 99.7 FM.
Money, Africa money, oga de chop am mo. Woman they way, rich they enjoy. I say.
Well, so we're back with Corruption Watch, and of course, we're here to offer you a refreshing break from the pure political talk ongoing in the courts and parliament. And we're starting 2021 with news that the Internal Audit Agency, under the direction of its Director General, Dr. Eric Odrosai, now they've shamed many public institutions for breaching the law in respect of internal auditing. On 5th February 2021, the Internal Audit Agency caused the publication of a list of 97 institutions in the Daily Graphic, accusing them of defaulting in the submission of required reports as at the end of December 2020. Now, Corruption Watch's subsequent checks and analysis reveal that regulatory institutions and academia top the list of defaulters. Guess what? The Public Procurement Authority, Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, Scholarship Secretariat, and the State Interest and Governance Authority among prominent public institutions that stand accused. Well, some blame COVID-19 for their inability to duly report, while others blame their failure on the lack of internal audit personnel. You should not miss the details that are coming up. Stay right here with us, because Corruption Watch is sponsored by Danida in collaboration with our partners, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, Ghana Integrity Initiative, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, and the Africa Center for International Law and Accountability, as well as multimedia platforms, Joy FM and Adum FM. Now, on social media, Facebook is Corruption Watch Ghana, Twitter is Corruption Watch or at CW Ghana, and then Instagram is Corruption Watch _Ghana, YouTube Corruption Watch Ghana, and our website is corruptionwatchghana.org. You can join us on our hotline 0552 200033, and also WhatsApp us on 0552 200033 or 055 453 6295, and use the hashtag Wanamoni or Ghana Abre. Now, you know that Corruption Watch has 6 segments, but on this episode we will feature one segment. On the From the Source segment, we'll bring you interviews of actors involved in the case or matter under discussion. And today we'll be hearing from the Internal Audit Agency. Now, their Director of Operations, Kenneth Eko Yankee, is joining us right here on the Super Morning Show to have this all-important discussion. So earlier I was telling you about the Internal Audit Agency that shamed many public institutions for breaking the law in respect of internal auditing. According to the Internal Auditing Agency, these institutions did not comply with provisions of the law requiring them to submit quarterly internal audit reports and 2020 annual internal audit plans as at the end of December 2020. Now, this is an antecedent to the IAA's action. You may recall that Dr. Odrosai has threatened in an interview which we played here on Corruption Watch in October 2020 that the agency would shame public institutions which broke the law as a starting point for dealing with internal audit infractions. Let me just refresh your memory with this clip.
Under the PFM Act, they are to submit their quarterly internal audit reports on a quarterly basis to the agency. The agency will review it, quickly send a team if there are systemic weaknesses to support them to put the weaknesses in line.
Okay.
Most of them are not submitting. So I intend publishing, and I've gone around nationwide to sensitize them, that I'll start publishing to name and shame institutions that do not submit internal audit report. By way of corruption and public financial management, if you don't submit internal audit report, it means control systems are weak.
Okay.
Funds that goes there, nobody knows what is happening. Again, if you fail to submit and I publish your name, the advantage is that I would then advise the Minister for Finance not to give you additional releases,
Okay.
because you have not accounted for a previous quarterly release. That's the first one.
So that was Dr. Eric Odrosai, who is Director General of the Internal Audit Agency, issuing an uncompromising caution to public institutions in an interview with Corruption Watch, which we played on the show in October 2020. Now, if you're wondering why Dr. Odrosai was insistent that public institutions should respect the law, here's the answer. The Internal Audit Agency and its staff are supposed to carry out audits before, during, and after spending. So we can say that they are in a better position to catch the thief before or during the stealing, making it easier to recover stolen public funds. Now, annual internal audit plans and regular internal audit reports play a crucial role in the performance of the mandate of the Internal Audit Agency. And subsequent to the 5th February 2021 publication of the list of defaulters, Corruption Watch journalists has been learning some of the institutions that COVID-19 prevented them from filing their reports, while others lacked internal audit personnel and audit committees. Fred will be joining us shortly, and he'll be helping us to understand more about some of their findings. But this morning, we've been joined by Nathan Kenneth Ekoyanki, who's Director of Operations of the Internal Audit Agency. Thank you very much, Mr. Yankee, for joining us, and Happy New Year would not be bad. We're meeting for the first time.
Thank you.
And also, this is 2021. Hope you're doing very well.
So I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. So before we get into why you issued, the names of these institutions to be published and what it means for even our fight against corruption, it's important we understand what the Internal Audit Agency is all about and what it does. What do you do?
Sure. Let me start with the creation of the Internal Audit Agency as, as an institution. The Internal Audit Agency was created by the Internal Audit Agency Act 2003, Act 658, with a mandate of providing national internal audit coverage and assurance services by coordinating, facilitating, and providing quality assurance for internal audit activities within the covered entities. And that is to make sure that within the covered entities, public financial management is effective. And we go about doing this through several functions that have been enumerated or provided under Section 3 of the Act. That includes certain standards and procedures for the conduct of internal audit activities within the covered entities. We're ensuring that financial, managerial, and operating information generated within and outside the covered entities are accurate, timely, and reliable. Also ensure that financial activities of these covered entities also follow the legal requirements, follow standards, follow laws, policies, and procedures. We also ensure that national resources are adequately safeguarded, and then these national resources are also used economically, efficiently, and effectively to achieve government objectives. We also go on to ensure that the risks are adequately documented, identified, evaluated, documented, analyzed, and then managed within the covered entities. We also ensure that there is good within the government administration programs. There is economy, there is efficiency, and there is effectiveness, what we call the value for money, also within the covered entities. We also keep the covered entities informed of deficiencies and weaknesses in their programs, and necessarily recommend corrective actions for them to correct them, and then make sure that they go on to achieve their plans, goals, and objectives. We also undertake monitoring, inspections, and evaluation of internal audit units within the covered entities. And then, not the least, is to facilitate the prevention and detection of fraud. And actually, it is for these functions that actually make the Internal Audit Agency an anti-corruption institution. And for which reason, when the current Director General, Dr. Eric Odrosai, assumed office, he quickly envisioned the agency becoming a pro-corruption prevention institution. And with its highest octave being an internal audit service, cabinet bill of which is currently with Ministry of Finance and will soon be laid before cabinet for approval, and thereafter to seek parliamentary assent or passage into an Internal Audit Service Act that will convert the agency into a service. So in short, that is what that is about, what the agency is. Regarding what we do, and especially leading up to the publication of the defaulters, we have, in order to be able to work this one through and to be effective and to be able to achieve our objectives, what we have done is to develop certain strategic objectives which we are working towards. And one of them is to continuously improve internal audit activities within the covered entities for effective public financial management.
So let's get to the publication. We observed that the Director General had recently advised covered entities not to negotiate the dropping of audit findings with staff of the AG during the 2020 audit, since the internal auditors have already submitted copies of their report on the issues to the head office and the internal audit agency. Now, this is a very loaded statement. What exactly is the problem?
So I just the issue is that normally you come to find some heads of covered entities or management of the tendency to put some premium on external audit reports and the issues in there on the auditor management's, Auditor General's report because of the impact that they make, because of the constitutional background and so on, over that of internal audit. And so you see issues reported by internal audit when there is the external audit, work, and their report that comes do not seem to capture them. Then it's like that is what is important. That of the internal auditor can be put somewhere or suspended. So you come to find a situation where you have issues reported in the Auditor General's report. That is the key. That is what they concentrate to work on without internal audit report. So then comes the issue of when the internal auditor's issues have been overridden by the external auditor's issues or report, then keep it away. So there's a tendency then that let's forget about the internal auditor's issues. And forgetting that already these issues have been reported, copies of which have been sent to the Auditor General himself already. And so when that happens, then there's a question mark. If you put Auditor General's report here, you put the internal auditor's report here, for the same period, you see issues in the internal auditor's report, which is not covered in there. Meanwhile, if you go to check, if you follow up, those issues are still
Why is that the case? I mean, why does it happen that way?
Yeah, that's some of the weaknesses that we're talking about, and it's within the system, which we should address. Because to put it in the actual context, what happens is that if internal auditors, like the earlier, the way you put it, our work is before the external audit. So if we are doing it well, then it means that as soon as the issues come up, management should be able to fix them. Now, when they are fixed, then the external audit does not even come to find it, because then it's not there. I mean, the problem has been solved, the control weakness has been strengthened. And so it's working, right? So by the time the external auditor is working, the control problem is solved. So he doesn't pick an issue there. And that is the ideal way to go. Rather than to leave it there, and then the external auditor comes to find it or to ignore it, then that is where the negotiation comes in. Because then the issue is there, it's not solved, it's not fixed, but it doesn't appear in the external auditor's report. You see, so that is, and so this caution, where the Auditor General gave this caution to the internal auditors to ensure that it doesn't happen. Yeah, so that the issues that they have reported, if they have not been fixed at the time of the external audit, it should also be reflected in the external auditor's report.
So let's now turn our attention to the shaming of 66 individual public entities for 2 forms of internal audit breaches. Help us appreciate the importance of these reports that the public institutions were supposed to submit.
Yes, the first, let me start with the annual plan. The annual plan by Section 83 of Section 83, Subsection 6 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, 921, provides or requires every internal or the head of internal audit unit to prepare and submit annual plan to the internal audit agency, to the Auditor General, and to the head of the institution, and of course the audit committee. Now, these plans, according to the requirement, the PFM Section 82 requires that they are submitted 30 days after the beginning of the new year. So after the beginning of the year in which the plan relates, within 30 days, and that is, if you calculate it, it's 31st January. So 31st January of each year, the annual internal audit plan should have been submitted.
Okay.
Then, based on the plan, it is the section 83, the same section 83, subsection 7, continues that a quarterly report has to be generated based on the plan by the head of the internal audit unit, and then be submitted in the same way. So the quarterly report that is prepared or that is generated by the head of the internal audit unit has to reach the agency by the end of the month following. And this one is by the regulation of the internal audit agency. This one is obtainable from regulation 43, subsection 4, sub-regulation 4 of that, which puts or gives the timeline 1 month after the quarter. That report should be ready with the agency. So, if, for example, if you are talking of the first quarter 2020, January to March, then April 2020, that report should reach the agency. You're talking of the second quarter report from April to June, and at the end of July, that report, the second quarter report, should reach the agency. You're talking of the third quarter report from July to September. At the end of September, at the end of October, that report should reach the agency. And so this is what, and you could see where we started from, because the Director General was talking about, it was from October. Yeah. And so we see that from October, all these reports were due. In fact, the third quarter was due, the others were overdue. And so we started the communications that they should be, forthcoming with their reports to comply with the laws.
You wrote to them?
We wrote to them.
Okay.
And actually, earlier, in fact, we had even written and we had met them, face to face in various seminars and meetings. For example, when the Director General assumed office, right in May, June, we did the institutional visit, as part of his courtesy call to on the institutions, the heads of institutions, ministers, chief directors, chief executives, and management of various covered entities. So we met them, and we informed them of their new vision and the way we're going to go about things. That this time we're just going to insist on the laws, and we're going to make sure that institutions comply. And everybody bought into it. Everybody understood it, and we had a heartfelt inclination that institutions were going to just comply with the laws. We didn't end there. In July, August, we actually traveled across the country to meet with heads of internal audit units. And then we still had this interaction with them. Because essentially they are the major stakeholders in this. They are going to work and produce the reports and the plans and so on. Then come November, or before November, we had actually written series of letters reminding them of the plans, reminding them of the reports before the 25th November issue of the publication. Because we had told them that because this is a legal requirement and this time we are up and running with it, we want you to submit these requirements as and when required. Now, if there's any failure or any default, then the first option that we're going to use or implement was to publish your name.
Okay.
Because we had earlier asked them to comply, and that failed. And so the next was to publish the names by way of naming and shaming, to compel them to comply.
So, Frederick is here. Frederick Esiama is with the Corruption Watch. Is a journalist of Corruption Watch is here. Because, Fred, I know that you spoke to some of these agencies, and what did they tell you? They said COVID-19 specifically. What concerns were about COVID-19?
Okay, so let me begin by saying that the reason we decided to treat this topic is that, as part of our corruption prevention agenda, we try to follow up on issues till they reach a certain conclusion. So once we became aware of the list, we said, okay, let's follow up and see why some of these institutions did not meet the requirement. In fact, before I even come to that reason, if you look at the list that was published, it was a total of 97. But if you do the analysis, you see that there are 66 individual institutions in there. 30 of that 66 are involved in the two infractions, not submitting the quarterly internal audit reports and not submitting the 2020 audit plan. 21 of them did not submit the quarterly reports, and 15 failed to submit their 2020 audit plan. That 66 is about 12.7% of the total number of covered entities that the IAA expects to. From my reading of their figures, they have a total of about 519, and 66 of that number did not submit. So we try to follow up. The NMC, National Media Commission, they promised that they will give us a full response, but the preliminary response they gave us was that they, for instance, do not have an internal audit personnel. They do not even have the unit. So they had written to IAA to request that they second a staff to them to enable them comply with the law. So maybe we may have answers to as to why that has not been done. SIGA, that's the State Interest and Governance Authority, they have also given us a preliminary response. And they said that in their case in particular, they needed to constitute their internal audit committee, or the audit committee, which is supposed to have about 5 members. 2 of them are supposed to come from within the institution, from their board, and then 3 are supposed to come from outside. It happened that the 3 nominees that they were waiting for became 4. 2 nominees came from the Chartered Institute of Accountants also, and then 2 nominees came from the Internal Audit Agency, which included Dr. Odruosan himself. And so the Chartered Institute of Accountants needed to withdraw 1 person. And so by the time they withdrew the 1 person, it had taken quite some time. The STC, headed by Nana Komia, they got to us yesterday in the evening with their reasons why they could not comply with the law. And Winston, if you permit me, I'll just read what they said. It's a brief letter that they sent, but essentially they were attributing their inability to comply with the law to COVID-19.
Okay.
The letter signed by Nana Komia, who is the managing director, says that, "Thank you for your interest in ensuring accountability and transparency at Intercity STC Coaches Limited, particularly the delayed response to the request of the Internal Audit Agency. Due to insurgence of COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in a partial lockdown, activities slowed down considerably, necessitating reduced working hours and extended leaves for key audit personnel in 2020 at Intercity STC Coaches Limited. It therefore delayed the submission of the 2020 internal audit plan, which was already in place." Now, they responded to one of our questions. One of the questions we posed to these entities is that, how are you going to avoid a recurrence of this infraction? And they said that the Internal Audit Agency notified the organization of the delay and infraction of the law. Intercity STC Coaches Limited quickly sent a copy of the internal audit plan before the publication with an apology for the late submission. Steps have been put in place to submit subsequent ones by 20th January every year.
Okay.
So that's their promise.
Yes, let me get to Mr. Yankee. Your reaction. I mean, so they've been giving explanations. What do you make of these explanations?
Well, I think that there seem to be some sweet explanations, to the, but our position is just the same, because if we're going to take excuses of this nature and say because of COVID and because of that, we're really not going to go anywhere, because the thing is that in spite of COVID, the government is spending. The public funds are still being used, and we still have to account for them. So what we recommended, or what we directed, even in the face of COVID, was for institutions to put in place what we call business continuity plans to be able to manage the situation. The thing is that we have always advised or directed institutions to be up to date with risk management practices. As I was saying earlier, that is part of our work. In fact, we've been providing capacity building and so on support to institutions in doing that. So if you have this inbuilt into your strategic planning, then you know that you have to expect or you have to provide secondary plans for managing risk or for managing those things when they occur. So yes, for now, once they have given that explanation, we'll take the explanation. But that doesn't settle us.
So when you say that doesn't settle you, it's important we find out a few things. So,
Yes.
Following the publication, how have they been responding to that publication, and what happens if the expiry dates or the deadline you've given them is not met?
Yeah. So first, the response. We are not appreciative of the response because, as I indicate to you, I think very handful, but it will not be more than 10. Those that will receive plans, those that defaulted in plans, not more than 10. And the report is virtually nothing to write home about. So the response is poor. And our next, and we had explained this earlier to them, and I'm sure they are aware. And so our next line of action is to then approach the minister, because we have that collaboration. And the minister has big authority in the PFM to be able to apply sanctions. The sanctions under offenses offenses and penalties from Section 96 to 98 is just available to the minister to apply. And so, for example, Section 98, Subsection 1 provides that when public officers fail to submit required information, they are liable for. That is construed as an offence, and that offence is liable to a summary conviction of not less than 150 penalty units, and not more than 250 penalty units, or not less than 6 months imprisonment, or not more than 2 years imprisonment, or to both. And this is, this is at the discretion of the minister, and he can do that. And that is the other leg of that. Even before that, he could even decide to delay your releases, the releases to the entities, especially those of them who are depend solely on the consolidated fund. Those of them who are IGF generating, internal generator fund, maybe they can still generate money and be able to go on. But those who depend on the subventions, it means that if the minister suspends or delays your releases, it's actually going to disrupt your operations and so on. So those are some of the other levels that will be going. We have the collaboration with him, with the Ministry of Finance, and that is the next line of action. If by the 28th February they still do not comply, then we are bound to take the next step of action.
Okay. Yes, Fred.
Yeah. So we need to also look at when you started the show, you mentioned some of the institutions, and in fact, what we are finding is that the majority, if you classify the institutions, the one that tops the list is the regulatory institutions. 15 of them, including the Public Procurement Authority.
That's the issue. PPA. Again.
And we've written to PPA. We wrote to them to ask them to respond. We still haven't got their response. But it's interesting the kind of regulatory institutions that are listed in here. I mentioned the NMC. And of course, Mr. Sapon spoke to me and said they will give us there. But that's the reason. But look, for instance, Council for Tertiary and Vocational Education Training, COTFET, is on that list. Law Reform Commission is on that list. Ghana Standards Authority is on that list. National Council for Tertiary Education. National Sports Authority. Okay. Public Utility Regulatory Commission. It's on that list.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Water Resources
I think
Commission.
that, just not to cut you, the PRC has submitted their plan.
They have now.
They have submitted their plan.
The Water Resources Commission is also on the list. Now you come to academia, and that one is academia. They also have about let me just be sure of the figure again. Academia has 12 on the list. SOEs, state-owned enterprises, 10 of them. MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies, 11 of them. If you take these top 4 categories, 48 institutions out of the 66. 48.
Interesting.
And
so-
academia includes KNUST, UPSA, and then some colleges of education.
UG is not part.
No, UGC.
let's move on. Let's move on. We need to follow up on all these institutions. But getting back to you, Mr. Yankee. So we know that from previous Corruption Watch episodes, we know the IAA, that's the Internal Audit Agency, took interest in the conduct of internal audit at the Zongo Development Fund. What's the state of the internal audit at the Zongo Development Fund, especially after the Zongo Ministry is now being collapsed?
Yeah, I think that it's the unit is still performing. In fact, they are one of the institutions whose 2021 annual plan has been submitted.
Okay.
We have
when
received.
did they submit it?
Oh yes, they made the timeline. They made the timeline. As far as I remember, they made the timeline before 31st January.
Okay.
So that is good enough, and we're just waiting to see where they will be classified. I mean, where now that the ministry is collapsed, which ministry it will fall under, and then we can continue with our relationship. But since then, it has been working well. I think when they followed up after that event and made sure that all the recommendations were implemented. So before even this collapse, or before the ministry was collapsed, that issue, that other report has been completed in terms of follow-up status of implementation. So we were satisfied with that level. I think what is still pending is the issue with the investigation of the conduct of the.
But you were conducting that investigation. You were leading it. What has happened to it?
Yeah, that investigation. Because I, as the head of the unit, I actually to allow enough independence. So the Director General actually constituted it with some other sessional heads to be able to make it a bit more independent. So work has progressed very well, and I'm sure very soon their report will be out.
Have you checked the status of the investigation? Do you know where you've reached with the investigation? Are you done with it? Where have you reached with the investigation?
Yes, as far as I know, I know they have completed the groundwork in terms of interrogations and information here and there and obtaining the evidence. I think they are just left with some few other things to finalize their report, and so it is at the reporting stage now. It is at the reporting stage now.
Yes, Fred, you want to say
No,
something?
I just want to ask whether they will make it available to the public, or say Corruption Watch, for instance, which they spoke to us, for instance.
Okay.
Will they make it available to us?
Okay. I wouldn't be able to, say enough of that. Maybe I have to get in touch with the Director General, and then I'll be. But I believe for you, Corruption Watch, you should have some information about it, especially because you were a stakeholder in that investigation.
So I mean, you've been talking about how some of them have not even submitted their yearly reports. How about the quarterly reports? I mean, these state institutions, have they submitted their quarterly reports also to you?
No, so for this one, for the first, no, not yet. We haven't, and that's what I was saying, that it's a plan that there's off fire that I could just say, because I've seen that one and a few others. It wouldn't be more than 10, but I would say that I wouldn't be able to be very sure of the number now as to how many have submitted their plan or report, but I know it's very small, limited number. And for us, because our focus is on the deadline, our focus is on the 28th February. That is where we'll go there and gather who of them have submitted and which of them are not. So those of them who won't be able to submit and find fair with that, and those who will not be able to do that, then we'll take the next line of action.
Talking about taking the next action, what specifically are the actions available to you? I mean, I know that you've talked about it, but again, for those who are just joining us, so they know if they default, what happens to them?
Yeah, so if that happens, then we'll raise a collaboration that we'll have with the Ministry of Finance to request for one, either not to release their quarterly releases. I mean, not to give them the quarterly releases, or to suspend the quarterly releases until they comply. But because he has the discretion over the application of the sanctions, we will just
And what are
discuss-
these sanctions that he has?
Yeah, so for the default, we're saying that we have done the publication. We have published, of course, we have copied his aware. We have done the publication. So the second round of action is that these are responsible public officials who have failed to comply with the PFM Act, and therefore Section 98 should be invoked. And when Section 98 is invoked, then the minister has the authority to be able to apply or request for prosecution of those officers to either seek imprisonment.
And what are the punishments available under the law?
Yeah, the punishment is that once you have failed to submit the information that is required by law, it is an offense. And that offense is liable to a summary conviction of a penalty not less than 150 penalty units and not more than 250 penalty units, or not less than 6 months imprisonment, or not more than 2 years imprisonment, or both. So the minister then will pursue the Attorney General for the prosecution.
Great. Fred, just go over the institutions, particularly the regulatory institutions who have been defaulting in submitting these annual plans, just so we know, because they are regulatory institutions, and so we just want to know.
Okay, my pleasure. So I was saying again that if you look at the list from the top, you have Council for Tertiary and Vocational Education Training, that's COTVET, Geological Survey Authority, you have Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority, Ghana, and Mr. Yankee can tell us which of them has submitted, as we mentioned them.
Okay.
Ghana Standards Authority, Law Reform Commission, Narcotic Control Commission, National Commission on Culture, National Council for Tertiary Education, National Media Commission, National Sports Authority, Postal and Courier Services Regulatory Commission, Public Procurement Authority. Of course, he says PRC has submitted.
Yes.
So the State Interest and Governance Authority, headed by Honorable Asamoah Boateng, Water Resources Commission.
I think that courier, not to cut you, sir, but I think that the Postal and Courier Services are also in touch with us. They submitted a draft, and they have requested for us to constitute their audit committee so that they can ratify the plan and then submit. So I think they are also in the process of complying. Yeah, Postal and Courier Services.
Okay, well, we'll follow up on this. I know Corruption Watch wouldn't let this go. We would also follow up on this and find out those that have submitted and those that haven't submitted. Thank you very much, Mr. Nathan Kenneth Okoyanki, who is Director of Operations of the Internal Audit Agency. And thank you also, Frederick Esiama, who is a journalist with Corruption Watch. So,
My pleasure.
You know
to
what?
be back. My pleasure. Yes.
thank you very much once again. Like, look, in our own small way, we can all help in the fight against corruption. So kindly reach us on the Corruption Watch hotline 0552200033 or on WhatsApp 0552200033 or 0554536295. And the partners of Corruption Watch are Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, GACC, Africa Center for International Law and Accountability, ASILA, and multimedia platforms Joy FM and Adom FM, and the sponsor is Danida.
Joy 99.7 FM.
Hide the storm. Monkey the work, but with the job. Okay, and mean who's the job? And yet who's the job? And now hide the storm. I think you know Africa before. And yet we get more. Cocoa, timber, food, and more. Yet we don't know we get all.
Joy 99.7 FM.
Share with you. 10 years. And nowadays.
Africa money, okay, the chop and go. Poor man, they work, rich they enjoy. I say, how we go bridge, oh? The gap between account and the job, oh. Okay, the chop and fuga. Back manager, they job. Okay, the chop and passa. Director,
Coffee in your cup and join